Welcome back to another Untitled streaming review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Merchant.
Hello, Matt. How are you?
May the force be with you.
May the force be with you always.
How you doing?
Slowly coming out of a viral infection, which is nice. I'm
The
able.
midichlorians got you.
They got me. My metachlorian count was way too high. It wasn't COVID. It was just a simple viral infection that was throwing off my voice because it always goes for the throat. And so I apologize for this bit of rasp that's coming out of my vocal cords. And I also had a bit of a sensitivity to lights, but now it seems to be getting better. I'm using eye drops. So, yay, I'm falling apart right before TIFF.
Eric, you are the chosen one!
I have the higher ground.
Today we are reviewing
Hello there.
Ahsoka, the new series on Disney Plus. The first 2 episodes, which are now available to stream. So we will be going full spoilers on this episode. No point of dancing around things since it's already available for people to stream. So we're gonna go full spoilers, talk about both episodes, what we thought about them. I'm loving already, outside of the actual content of the show, that Disney Plus changed their release strategy for Ahsoka. So it is going to be available to stream every Tuesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific, which, praise the Jedi, is happening, because the release at 3 a.m. Eastern and at midnight Pacific, I felt like just tanked a lot of these shows, or at least the conversation around these shows, where yes, I'm assuming that was because of a worldwide release strategy, where in certain areas it released at normal times and things like that, and people on the West Coast could still watch live, but or at least when it aired at midnight if you stayed up really late. But I saw more chatter about Ahsoka last night at 9 p.m. Eastern than I did for all of Secret Invasion or all of Book of Boba Fett or all Mando season 3. Like, I feel like a lot of these shows just kind of went out to die because they were being dumped in the middle of the night. And then I'm not saying that that's the reason, because content and the quality of it was the thing. But anyways, I want to get that out of the way. I'm so happy about that. I'll keep screaming that from the rooftops. But today, the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka, Eric, I mean, we can just get right into it.
Yeah, man. I think
I
we should.
haven't spoken to you about this at all because I watched it on screeners about a week ago. You had an issue where you had to watch it last night. I'm just going to kick it over to you first. What you think of Ahsoka?
Okay, so Ahsoka shines in the quiet moments of reflection as it slowly begins to take off. Rosario Dawson is perfectly cast in the lead role. I will say that I think that this show is geared towards fans of Clone Wars first and foremost, and Rebels, because there's a lot of minutia and detail that, if you haven't spent a lot of time with the animated series or franchise aspects of this world, you might feel a little bit lost in some of the references or the relationship between the 2 lead characters, Ahsoka and Sabine Wren, which is kind of the fulcrum of these first 2 episodes, at least in terms of, getting them back together and maybe knowing a little bit more about their backstories together. So, I think it's better than the last season of The Mandalorian, which I caught up with not too long ago, and also the Book of Boba Fett. And you have someone like Dave Filoni, who obviously is somebody that is very much steeped in the mythos and the lore of Star Wars. So, I kind of both appreciate that it's becoming more geeky and kind of like really getting into the weeds, but at the same time, as a Star Wars fan, I kind of checked out around the time after Revenge of the Sith, so I never really got into Clone Wars or Rebels, and for that, I kind of feel like I'm missing out a little bit, where I know you, Matt, were watching those shows, or at least some of them, and maybe you have a stronger take or insight into sort of the details or the specifics of what works or what doesn't, and what makes the show kind of its own unique thing within the Star Wars canon.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about that is after people kept telling me like, "Hey, you need to go watch Clone Wars and Rebels," I kind of put it off for like a really, really, really long time. I think partially with Clone Wars, it was because of its association with that second movie, where I was like, "This can't possibly be good." Um, but I did go back and watch like a machete order of Clone Wars, which is like kind of like taking out all the filler. It's like when I did Dragon Ball Z Kai.
Rebel
Um,
Kai.
yeah. So I went back and watched only the quote unquote important episodes, or the ones without filler. Which then gave me the story of Ahsoka, which is where I fell in love with that character, and as well as gave a lot of depth to the Anakin Skywalker character, and actually made me like give a shit about that character, and actually redeemed that character for me. And that was all Filoni's doing, right? So that's why I kind of thought he was the perfect guy. Obviously, he is the perfect guy. He created this character and certain things like that. But like to give him a shot in live action, which he's been doing on Mandalorian and doing a bit through the Mandoverse stuff, it's so awesome that he gets this show to kind of highlight all of his creations in those animated series. For Rebels, I could never get into it because of its art style. It felt like almost too kiddie, and I'm not someone who likes to put off animation for how it looks and stuff like that, or think animations for kids, because I'm clearly not that. But it was always something that just turned me off from it. I just never vibed with the art style, but I did care about the characters and the story. So I kind of went through and watched highlights, or episodes people told me to watch. I went through and read exactly what happened. So I know about Thrawn, I know about Ezra, I know about Kanan, I know about Ahsoka and Hera and Sabine, and like that whole storyline. Bo Katan all comes from all that stuff. So I had some history with these characters before they showed up in live action. Um, so with all of that said, like I I really vibed with these first 2 episodes, and I think you don't need to have the history of Rebels and Clone Wars. Like, my wife watched the 2 episodes last night, and she discussed with me, like, that she had some questions about, certain characters, and I gave her some background and just kind of that context, which not everyone's gonna have. But I think the show does a good enough job of kind of, we've been introduced to Ahsoka, we kinda know her history, even if you've only met her in Mando and Book of Boba Fett. Um, but I don't think it necessarily hinges on you having to know all the details about Clone Wars and Rebels. Like, I do think that, it starts with an opening scroll and you kind of get the background you need, just like when you're watching a Star Wars movie, and that thrilled me. And I really feel like it feels like classic Star Wars in the best ways. And Filoni is clearly a guy who loves classic Star Wars. We're always going to have Andor. We're going to have Star Wars After Dark. We're going to have that gritty kind of darker side of Star Wars. And that's kind of why I love Star Wars in this universe, because it can be many different things for many different people, right? There are some things that can be geared towards kids. There's going to be some things geared towards more adults. There's going to be something that's kind of in between that like families can watch together, but like hardcore like Star Wars fans might be nostalgic about, or like kind of like, we mentioned this in our Mando reviews, maybe not so much with season 3, but why we like that series is it kind of blends that goofy side of Star Wars with the serious side, where it's like Star Wars has always been kind of corny, right? Like people in costumes, puppets, things like that. But that's kind of like the Star Wars charm, right? Like something a bit doofy about certain things, even though everything is very serious that's happening in this world and different things like that. But it wears its influences on its sleeve. It is goofy with some of the makeup and like, if you're not already a Star Wars fan, like I could see you showing this series to someone and people going, I don't know why you like this, right? But like, I think if you have that built in nostalgia, whether it's for the Lucas movies or for Rebels or for Clone Wars, like I feel like there's a lot here for you to enjoy. And like, Jedi are still really, really cool. Like lightsabers are really, really cool. And I'm so glad we're back to Jedi after taking a little bit of a break from them. And I think people weren't necessarily sick of Jedi stories. I think they were just sick of the Skywalker saga and everything having to revolve around that one family, right? We got 9 movies and every Jedi thing had to go back to Luke Skywalker, right?
It's a pretty small galaxy, right? Like, it's like, come on,
Yeah.
it's bigger than just the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, so and yes, I know Ahsoka is very, attached to Anakin Skywalker. Her story is still very much part of that story, so it's not like we're completely far removed from the Skywalkers, but this is focusing on Ahsoka. It's a focusing on the crew from Rebels, and it is very much kind of that sequel to the Rebels series, but then also it almost feels like a prequel to the sequel series, right? Like what Filoni has been doing with Jean Favreau in I don't know why I called him like Jean Favreau, like his friend, like he's French.
He's earned that
Um,
European
yeah.
title.
But it really like you can kind of see them planting the seeds and taking loose threads and kind of trying to tie them together and like what Filoni did in Clone Wars, which is like, okay, let me look at the prequel movies and let me try to add some depth and some extra context and make everything make sense, make characters better. And I think what he's doing with the Mandoverse now and Ahsoka, I really think he's looking at the sequel series because he really does fucking love Star Wars and he's trying to make everything make sense, right? Or he's trying to make them complement each other in the way that you go, you didn't like how the Emperor came back. Well, maybe I'm going to start planting the seeds of how they created Snoke, how they're cloning, how they're doing. You don't like how the First Order came to be and it was just very much like the Empire. Okay, I'm going to try to show you how Thrawn maybe um, was the catalyst to all of that stuff, and I'm going to lead you right into Force Awakens and things like that, and really bridge those gaps in all the movies with these TV shows and things like that, and have this big shared universe. And yes, you just made a joke about being it very small, not everything needs to be connected, but in this sense, I guess I'm pleased that it still feels far removed from that, but then they're still trying to make it work with everything else. And I feel like, yeah, these first 2 episodes were a little bit of a slow burn. But I liked the introduction or reintroduction, if you watch the animated shows, to these characters and this crew. Seeing characters like Sabine and Hera in live action was kind of wild to see. The reveal of like Sabine was training with Ahsoka to be her apprentice to become a Jedi was a big reveal for people, I think, who watched um, Rebels, seeing the little Ezra message, like all these little things. And I thought like, Ray Stevenson was great as this kind of like dark Jedi. They don't want to call them Sith. They're like kind of
He's a mercenary,
like,
basically, for
yeah,
hire.
yeah, they're former Jedis who became mercenaries, and that's really cool. And they have these kind of orange tinged lightsabers because they're not quite on the dark side, but they're still sort of Jedis, but they're kind of in the middle. So I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I just really vibed with this. I thought the action sequences were great. The lightsaber battles were cool. Like again, it has that doofiness with some of the makeup where like Ahsoka's how her head sits on her shoulders is kind of like rubbery and goofy
It's like,
looking
like
at
her
times, and same
talons,
with her.
right? Like,
Yeah, and same with Hera's, like Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character. Like it never looks real, but it looks like Star Wars, right? And like even though like the way it sits and even Sabine's wig before she cuts her hair is just like nothing quite like you know looks amazing, but it's got that Star Wars kind of feel to it. And that's why it felt like classic Star Wars to me. And like, yeah, I really vibed with these first couple episodes. I really liked them.
yeah, I still do enjoy the world and the characters and appreciate this story trying to maybe venture out a little bit away from Skywalker right now, because you're in that kind of interim of, okay, well, this one trilogy of movies is done, this other trilogy of movies is coming up. We're kind of caught in an in between and a bypass right now. So let's see what's happening in those kind of, the corners and the cracks of the world building. However, going back to, feeling a little bit lost, there were a couple moments where I was thinking to myself, did I miss something in The Mandalorian? The way that I we talked about this with the Book of Boba Fett, where the last couple of episodes of the Book of Boba Fett became basically the Mandalorian season
Yeah.
3, where it was setting things up for season 3. And if you didn't watch those episodes and you saw Grogu come
Grogu's
in,
just back.
it's just
Yeah.
back. Where I felt that a little bit with some of Sabine's story with Ezra, and sort of the liberation of her planet and the people, and her becoming this hero who doesn't really want to be a hero, who's kind of reluctant, living on the outskirts of society. And as much as I love seeing someone like Clancy Brown pop up, who's always great, it did feel a little bit like, oh, am I missing something here? And like,
Yeah.
I feel a little bit lost. But the broader strokes of it, because it's Star Wars, you understand, and you're quick to catch up on things. And I think, like, even that opening sequence with Mark Wolstan, who a lot of people will probably recognize as either Drake in Aliens. He's the one that hangs out with Vasquez, and he gets burnt before they enter back into the ship and get out, or the tank, and get out of that first kind of confrontation with the aliens. Or in the Shawshank Redemption, he's the one that's tormenting Tim Robbins' character. Or in
Okay.
The
Yeah.
Departed, he's the one that realizes DiCaprio's an undercover cop before he gets shot and he dies. So he's done a lot of stuff. But that whole sequence is basically mirroring A New Hope, the opening sequence of A New Hope, instead of an escape sequence, or an escape sequence in this show, or in this episode, where compared to A New Hope, and even at the end of Rogue One, you had an infiltration and a kidnapping of Princess Leia. So it's interesting where one's an escape and one is basically basically kidnapping, capturing kind of scenario. And then when you get to some of the dynamics between these characters, I think some of the strongest parts, and interesting when you do look at the reflections of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and how that relationship kind of failed in the most spectacular of ways, and how melodramatic it was. You look at how Ahsoka and Sabina's kind of fractured relationship isn't a lot of histrionics or melodrama or shouting. It's mostly just kind of a very simple back and forth, and there's no need for it to be over dramatized. And both actors in this case, and the characters, the way that they're written, they have a shorthand with each other, that it's kind of like, okay, well, we've been estranged for a while. I don't really want to come to you for this, but because I found this map, this star map. It seems like every character, every Jedi, or every character
Has a
has the
star
star
map.
map to locate them, which maybe is also foreshadowing what's going to happen with the Force Awakens with Luke. But it just kind of feels like, okay, well, we're getting into some symmetry there. But I really like those little quiet moments, or when Dawson's character finds the star map, and it's mostly all score up until she comes out of this almost Indiana Jones archaeological dig, that you find out it's kind of like almost like a coven that's been
Yeah.
abandoned. So things like that, I think, work really well. And then even Sabine remind me a little bit of Pete Maverick, where, like, she's escaping the
Yeah.
ceremony, and she's riding the
The
speeder bike.
motorcycle, but
And
it's a speeder bike.
yeah, and like the way that she's kind of like trying to bail from authority and do her own thing. um those little moments, I think, work really well. It's really nice to see Ray Stevenson in a role that's befitting of him. Obviously his passing was too soon, and he was one of those guys that kind of like made a lot of people sort of like stand up and take recognition when he gave an amazing performance in Rome, in
Yeah.
the HBO series. But he never kind of had that kind of role again, and he often got kind of relegated to, supporting characters in the Thor series. Or, he tried to kind of make a go with it with the Punisher Warzone as a lead, but it never really kind of went anywhere. But this kind of, even the way there's this one line where at the end of the second episode, he gets the orders to kill Ahsoka, and he's kind of like, "Oh, that'd be a shame." And the person's like, "Oh, I didn't know you're sentimental." He's just like, "Oh no, it's the truth, because there's not many
There's
Jedis
not.
left."
Yeah.
And the way that that's delivered, I feel like that's a very sincere thing. And both episodes, what they're kind of focusing on in terms of the themes or the ideas here, is where do the politics lie, and the profits of it. Like, who's motivated by money, who's motivated by an ideal, or an idea of doing something for the greater good or humanity. And
Yeah.
Ahsoka seems to kind of be taking those strides. But the one thing I don't like about the Jedi, and it's kind of proving this a little bit in these first two episodes, especially when Ahsoka says that Anakin never finished the training, is that the Jedi's never finish anything. It's like
Yeah.
Yoda never finished the training with Luke. Ahsoka and Anakin never finished their training. Rey and Luke never
There's a
finished
few
their
problems
training.
with the Jedi Order. They're not perfect.
No,
They're
they're
not
far
perfect.
from perfect, and I think that that's kind of
Hypocrites, maybe a little bit.
hugely, and I think that's where I kind of got burnt out with Jedi, where I rather see characters that are, 4-star generals, like the Mary Elizabeth Winstead character. Like I really love the
Yeah.
line where she says, "Nothing is nothing is classified for me because I'm a 4-star general."
Yeah.
Like those lines I really like.
But that's what I love about Star Wars, though, is that we get a little bit of all of that,
Yeah,
right? Like, and it blends that stuff really interestingly. And I think the Jedi are shown to be, not perfect in at least all the movies
they
that
kind of
we've
suck
seen.
sometimes. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
they do. Don't get no for sure. And that's why I think like the Ray Stevenson character Balin Skull and Ivanna Sakhno's Shin Haiti like being his apprentice and like a Jedi apprentice with the braid and everything. And like you mentioned that one line, which I think is great, which really shows that like, yeah, the Jedi Order is gone. He still considers himself a Jedi, but the Order's gone. So he's just working for whoever wants to pay him now. But he's not a Sith Lord. Like he's not out just to do evil shit and take over the galaxy or something like that. He's just a former Jedi. I'm trying to get by. I need some money. You tell me what you need me to do. I don't really have morals anymore because the Order's gone. Right? Like they tried to kill me. I'm just doing my own thing now. And I think that's kind of cool. And then I'll be interested if when we dive deeper, like we haven't really, I know in the books that they have, but I haven't read any of them, like explored the High Republic. Like I would like to see the Jedi at their full, like, power essentially, or when they were like at their highest, because I feel like we have seen the slow decline of the Jedi Order. So I feel like we always see it in this kind of light that you're mentioning.
Do you think the Acolyte is going to focus on some of that stuff, like the
Yeah, because
rise
it
of
is
them?
supposed to. Well, it's supposed to take place in the High Republic, right? But it is kind of, I think, on like the seedier side. I think,
The
if
Sithier
I'm,
side.
yeah, like so, I think there is that rumor that James Mangold's going to make, a movie called The First Jedi, which I think could explore a lot of that stuff, which could be interesting. But anyways, back to the show. Like, yeah, I'm with you, and I love that we kind of get a little Jedi stuff. We get that kind of military stuff with Hera, and that's what Rebels was so great at as well. Um, I thought kind of the lightsaber battles were cool. It's they're kind of a middle ground of like, in the prequels they were really kind of kinetic and flippy and fast, and then the older movies they were, obviously a bit slower and more methodical. So like I think we get a good middle ground with the lightsaber battles in this,
They look
and
like
fights.
popsicles, though. I'm going to be
Um,
real. I find that like every time I watch one of these
the new
movies now,
design of
yeah, the
them, or
new
like
ones
the
look
yeah
almost like they're popsicles. But to go back to, I think you just pointed out something that's really important here is, the old and the new. When those movies were being made, it was not just a tech thing, but it was also a style choice because it was emulating the Akira Kurosawas of the world, those, classic samurai movies. And so, the slow kind of drawn out aspect, or even, westerns. A lot, you mentioned Logan as well, and we've mentioned James Mangold a couple times here. The idea of the lone gunman coming in to clean up the town, and that's been very much the it seems like the mission statement for the Mandalorian. Here, you're getting a more modern version of action sequences and fighting, and that's just to, the part of the course, because it's the world we live in now, the 21st century, and people want things faster and more, slick and well designed, and to kind of be less antiquated in that way. But there is something kind of missing there, even when you were talking about, the headpieces or things like that.
yeah
I miss when Star Wars was shot on film, because the
yeah
grain and kind of the focus of it, like if it wasn't
could hide a little bit of that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I
yeah, I
feel
agree.
that's missing.
I definitely agree with you. When we get into the 4K, Ultra HD, Dolby Vision, kind of like, yeah, it can look great, but it's something we complained about with Mando. Is like, yeah, the what do they call the volume or whatever they call it?
Yeah. Where they're shooting
I
in like a green screen, but you can see like, or a blue
It's
screen,
not
but
a green screen. It's a
it's
actual,
like a projection.
an LED screen that's
Yeah.
around them where they actually like have what they're doing. And obviously, they probably used it in this show as well. But what was so refreshing about Andor, Andor, is that they didn't do
Tony
that, right? Or they
Gilroy
did
was
it
like,
very
fuck no.
no, and like you could tell, and the production design is so great, and you could tell that they were at real locations. Because when you get these super high def cameras, yeah, I feel like that was the problem with the Hobbit movies and stuff when they were in, 48 frames per second and things like that. You can really tell what looks fake. And like, you can tell that, I think, here. And it added to that. Star Wars has always had that retro futuristic look, right? Where it is a little bit grimy. The tech is kind of, it's futuristic at times, but then is also kind of crummy. It's dirty in a lot of the, planets and stuff like that. And I feel like film and that grain and the texture, yeah, obviously hid some of those flaws, but also enhanced some of them as well. And I agree with you that that is kind of missing. And I'm curious to go back because you watched the actual Disney Plus versions, which were in 4K and didn't have a giant watermark over the middle. So like, I'm curious to go back and watch them in that quality because like, for me, it's a different thing of like, I couldn't get engulfed in it because of certain things. I'm very lucky to get to watch stuff early, but like, it is hard to kind of completely, dive into something when you're distracted a big part of the time. But yeah, I liked Sabine going back to it, like the action sequences which we were talking about. Like, I liked those droid kind of mercenaries that were coming after them. I thought they were cool. And like, continuously, like these, I don't know what class. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but there are people who are Star Wars fans and know every little thing about the ships and the droids and different things like that. But I liked the kind of mercenary droids. I like that one sequence with Sabine where she tries to use the lightsaber and has that duel with um is it Shin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they have kind of a quick lightsaber battle, and Sabine is using Ezra's lightsaber, so she has that in her possession. It looks like it's altered because in the show he had a blaster lightsaber, like it was a blaster and a lightsaber in one, which was kind of cool.
Well,
But
the David Tennant voiced robot does
yeah,
mention that
that
she
she made
altered
some
it.
yeah, that's part what she altered.
And the whole time I thought
um
that was Toby Jones until I
did
saw
you? Yeah,
the end credits. I was like, that sounds a lot
yeah.
like Toby Jones.
And he was David Tennant did the voice in this animated series as well from Clone Wars. So I like that sequence. Sabine getting stabbed. I mean, it's television, good cliffhanger, but immediately she's fine the next episode because of going to the hospital and things like that. So
Love those droids
um,
as well. The repair health droids, the ones with the
yes,
masks.
yes, those are dope. I just love the design in Star Wars. So um yeah, I mean, I'm excited, man. Like, Chopper coming back to Chopper, everyone likes because he's a little psychopath and doesn't care about like human life and shit like that. Like, he doesn't care about collateral damage and stuff like that.
That's the
So
one who Rosario
um
Dawson's
yes,
fights
Chopper is
outside of like the shipyard, right?
no, well, he's the droid that's with her or with Hera, I think, on the
Oh, okay,
ship.
okay, okay.
um
Oh, now
I'm talking
yes, now
about
I know
that.
who you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He has like the little hands and stuff like
yeah.
that. Like, it translated really well to
But who was
live
that? Who was
action,
that other guy? Was he part of like the
Yeah,
Brotherhood
you're
then?
good point. Yeah, possibly.
He looks like Snake Eyes, basically.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. And then there's the Inquisitor too, which also like I feel like I don't know if it's a good theory or not, but like I feel like something in this is gonna lead into the Knights of Ren or something. And I know we're way too early about it, but like even the
Oh, is that why
Inquisitor and
the
how they look and like
Sabina Wren thing kind of that's what's supposed to
no,
be?
I don't think so. But like I think we're too early to lead into that, obviously, because you know, I don't think we're even close to, Ben Solo being born yet. I don't think, or he'd just be being born soon. But like,
Ben,
I get lost in the timelines exactly. Like, I know, like, kind of where we are,
right?
but then I don't know the specific dates and stuff like that. But um, yeah, we haven't talked much about the. It's interesting them the including the witches in this as well. Um, which we haven't got um a ton of that of like the Night Sisters and things like that from Dathomir. So which you get a lot in obviously the animated series, but they're also in the Star Wars video games as well. So this is what's interesting about all of this is like if you're not, it's much like the problem we have with Marvel right now too, right? Like if you're not consuming everything, are you getting the full story? Or if you're not playing the video games and not watching the animated series and not doing this, like are you getting it? Or not reading the novels, right? Like that's one thing I don't really read is all the High Republic novels. And I'm sure it's just complimentary stuff. Like you don't necessarily need to play Jedi Fallen Order to get, you know, the Night Sisters. Uh and I think that's where Darth Maul's from as well. But or something like that. I get lost. There's so much going on, but I
But
kind
that's
of
the
like
thing, though.
that.
I feel with this the big criticism here with this show
Yeah,
is that there are aspects where if you're not a completist, you're not going to be fully able to immerse yourself in every aspect of it, and there might be a couple of moments where you almost have to be, stop and think, wait, did I miss something along the way? Because again, I'm a Star Wars
and she
fan.
was in Mandalorian. I don't even remember. Like,
Well, Ahsoka was, right?
no, yeah, I know that, but the woman who plays the Night Sister, the Morgan Elsbeth,
Yeah, she was in an episode. I think it was a one-off
right?
episode or two episodes.
Okay, right.
But that's what I'm talking about, where the continuity here is so important that even more so than Marvel, because at least with the Marvel movies, it's like, okay, well, you just have the Marvel films and the TV shows, and like you're saying, the idea of
There's
the
not comics and video
no,
games
those
and
are
novels.
complementary because it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I know who this character is without having to look him up. But within the context of a live action movie or TV show, it's being reinvented for
yeah.
this timeline or this narrative. Where with this, it does feel like there are those pieces of the puzzle that if you aren't as familiar with, you're going to stop and think to yourself, did I catch everything I was
And even me,
supposed
who
to?
is kind of familiar with it
Yeah.
all, right? Like, is even doing that a little bit. So I definitely understand that. I just, while I was watching, I didn't feel that much. And mind you, we've only seen 2 episodes. They could, when we get more of Ezra, or when we finally see Thrawn, or when we get Anakin Skywalker, maybe there'll kind of be some flashbacks or some retold in live action or something like that from the Clone Wars series or from Rebels or something like that. So like it is interesting. We didn't get Thrawn, we didn't get Anakin at all in which I didn't expect to get like Anakin in the first 2 episodes, but I thought
We
maybe
did get a
Thrawn,
mention though of Anakin.
and we got a mention of Thrawn. So like multiple mentions of Thrawn. So like, and that was set up in Mandalorian as well, right? Which is another thing that we talk about too, of like, especially if people don't know that these are all kind of connected, that you could even be lost if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett going into Mandalorian, and you could be lost in Ahsoka if you didn't watch both of those, because Ahsoka's in both of those series, right? So,
Yeah.
and like the hints at Thrawn at the end of Mando season 3, which also tie into, the First Order and things like that, which I'm mentioning. So yeah, I definitely understand that part of it. And we're just in a world now where if you shared universe wise, like you either have to be all in or kind of just go, well, I'm not going to know everything and that's fine. Or I'm just going to be here for, the story that they're trying to tell, which I think is okay. They just have to do a good job at that. So I'm very curious to see where this goes. I'm excited to see, Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn. And see how that translates to live action. And, I love that they're bringing in some of the actors that played these characters in the animated series and bring them into live action as well. I thought, obviously Mary Elizabeth Winstead does a great job as Hera. Natasha Lou Bordizzo as Sabine Wren, I think she crushes it. Like, um, I love Sabine's design. I love her character. I like the addition of her training to be a Jedi, and especially in the loss of Ezra at the who goes missing at the end of Rebels and things like that. So, are we gonna get a Freddie Prince Jr. Cameo? Because we did hear his voice in Rise of Skywalker. I know Kanan has uh been dead for a while, spoilers for Rebels, but like I could see some sort of Force ghost or flashback or something like that, like come on, Freddie Prinze Jr. live action
But
in
then
Star
again,
Wars
that will go back
with
to
a
like our main criticism here is that a lot of people might not know who that
no,
is.
oh,
And then
they
when
had
Freddie
no
Prinze
idea.
Jr. shows up,
Yeah,
they'll be like,
yeah.
what is Freddie Prinze Jr. doing here?
What's Freddie doing here? Yeah, I definitely understand that, but we'll see. Are you excited for the rest of the series, Eric? Or how are you
Yeah,
feeling?
I love Star Wars so much, so I'm able to kind of let some of those pet peeves go a little bit,
Yeah,
or those kind of pockets that I'm unfamiliar with, because again, when Revenge of the Sith came out, I was so burnt out on Star Wars at that point that I didn't get into Clone Wars, I didn't get into Rebels, I never went back really and read any new material that was being produced post the prequels at the end of that, and that's where I was burnt out. So I almost feel like weirdly that I'm at a loss at times, and also
yeah,
that like it's like, oh, it's maybe it's kind of a shame that because I didn't have a problem with the animation, like the animation aspect of it never bothered me. It was just more so like I spent so much of my childhood loving Star Wars that once we got
hmm
into those prequels, it felt like,
and when you felt burned
I
by
felt
them, and just
heartbroken
like
by it
yeah.
all, and
And I think people felt the same after Rise of Skywalker a little bit too,
yeah.
right? Like I feel like we got so much so fast with all the Disney stuff that I feel people, did. And I think Star Wars even now, like I did see a lot of people talking about this last night because it does have its hardcore fans, but you could tell Andor wasn't, maybe as big of a thing as it should have been. And like Mando season 3, I felt like kind of came and went. And I know people really like Mando season 1 was an event, right, with Baby Yoda and everything like that, and I do hope that that comes back. And so, like, yeah, you've waited the last couple series and then binged them. I think other than Andor, which we
Andor was
watched,
the one where like it
yeah,
felt like after the
I
first
had to
couple of
watch it each week.
episodes, yeah, like it was taking it in a new direction. I really liked Tony Gilroyd's attitude when it came to, who gives a shit about the Emperor, and like let me tell a good story first. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of, as much as I like Dave Filoni and he seems like a really nice person,
Oh,
and
but he's all about the continuity and
right,
that kind
where
of stuff,
you
right?
don't have to be, adherent to that continuity all the time. I think telling a good story is the most important aspect of any narrative. And if you feel that you have to be hindered by what's come before or falling in line with it, I understand in terms of just a historical context, or again, the continuity of a world that's been created and you're filling in the gaps, or you're working within kind of these spaces. But there is something about Andor that just kind of feels like it is its own thing, and it's not playing by the rules that have been established. It's the bad boy of the Star Wars universe in a way, and for that I kind of want more of that, and I want more,
Oh,
not
totally,
that it
but
has to be so
only that.
sophisticated in its writing, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
need, but there's some writing here that I think is really good. Again, like that second episode when they're in the shipyard and you have a character actor like Peter Jacobson who pops in, who's probably best known for the House series, talking about like, I'll leave the politics to you. I'm more about
Yeah.
who's paying well. And that seems to be the
A
main
theme,
theme
yeah.
of this show, where like alliances are being skewed. It doesn't, and even Benicio del Toro's character, when he
Totally. We've
pops
seen
up
that
in
a
The
lot
Last
in
Jedi.
Star Wars, right? When they've
Yeah.
talked about like, especially people who build, these warships and things like that, or the X-Wings and the TIE fighters are built by the same people, and they're selling to everyone and they don't care, right? Like there's a lot of people in this universe that they just don't give a shit who's in charge.
As
They're
long
just
as you
trying to make
pay, that's
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's the god, or that's
Which
the symbol we follow, is the
I mean,
money.
and that's kind of what happens in real life too. Okay, yeah, I'm excited. I think I will watch this weekly. I mean, I've been that guy who's watched every Marvel series and every Star Wars weekly, so that shouldn't be a surprise. And I think even more so, um, like for you,
It's on it
are
at a
you more
reasonable time. That's why I'm gonna
that's what I
watch
mean. Are
it.
you that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So like if this was on at 3 in the morning, I could see you letting them pile up and
Yes.
then you
Yeah.
watching them later. But because it's 9 p.m., that feels like a prime time slot where you can watch it before bed and then you watch it when everyone else is watching it and then you go to sleep. So
Yeah.
like I feel like now you're more likely to keep up with this week to week because of that. It feels like that HBO style, like 9 p.m.s on Tuesday is Disney Plus night, whether it's going to be hopefully Loki as well. And I think Loki premieres just right after this, right? In
Yeah, because
October, I
October
think. Yeah.
6th, right? Or like that first
Yeah.
week of October.
Yeah, so I hope they continue this with the 9 p.m. release, and I'm hoping they're seeing more chatter about this stuff because of that. Because I will be 9 p.m. on the dot watching this every week, so I'm excited for it. Well, thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. TIFF's coming up. We're gonna have a buttload of reviews over the next month or so. Before the festival, during, after. We'll have a bunch of stuff for you guys to check out from the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival. We also have a review up for Gran Turismo, which you guys can check out. And I'm sure we'll be covering even more stuff over Bottoms in the next week or so. So there'll be lots of stuff right here on Untitled Movie Reviews. Please go check out our letterbox, which is untitled_movies. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinema scene. Matt is on a future episode talking about video game movies, which is a special themed series. And on
And then
top of that,
Sonomacine.
Sonoma Scene with fellow film critic Shaquille Lambert, where we talked about the fall festival season and then weirdly detoured into a conversation about Saw. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, if you have time, please write a review on iTunes or any any of those sites that you go to download your content. I know Stitcher's no longer available, or it's not.
Is it? I
I
don't
think
know.
I heard.
Can't keep up with
Yeah,
everything.
social media is a weird landscape.
All right. And let us know what you think of our new album art and stuff, because changing things up, because Apple's changing things up. So I thought I'd give something else a try. But until next time.
I just want to hang out with Sabine's cat, man. That cat thing is
Oh, the lawful
awesome.
cat. Yeah. Hell
Oh,
yeah. Meow.
I want one.